Good evening. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is in New Delhi on a state visit. This is his fourth trip to India and his second as Palestinian Authority President. Mr. Abbas met the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, President Pranab Mukherjee and Vice President Hamid Ansari, besides the External Affairs Minister. On the agenda with Prime Minister Singh were a host of bilateral issues, and the two leaders exchanged views on regional developments in the West Asia and Gulf regions as well. 3 pacts, including one in the field of information and technology, were also inked after the talks. India has also promised a $10 million contribution to Palestine and pledged its support to Palestine's bid for full and equal membership of the UN. India's supportive stance, a stand towards Palestine, comes in the wake of the United States making it clear that it will veto the Palestine bid for a non-member status at the United Nations later this month. At present, Palestinians only enjoy observer status. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's remarks today are very interesting, not just because it leaves no doubt on where India stands regarding the issue of Palestinian statehood, but also because India has close ties with Israel, the other main player in the dispute in West Asia. Just last year, India signed a number of defense pacts with Israel, and the armies of both countries hold joint training exercises routinely. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on The Big Picture, we explore the feasibility of India's continuing balancing act. On one hand, the moral and diplomatic support to the right of the Palestinian people weighs heavy on India's conscience, and on the other hand, its growing ties with the state of Israel puts India on a tightrope where its relations with Israel and the United States will be tested. My eminent panel tonight includes Waeil S. Awwaad, senior Arab journalist, Pramit Chaudhri, foreign affairs editor at the Hindustan Times, Rajeev, Sikri, former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, and AK Pasha also joined us. He is the director of GulfStudies program in JNU. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. I'd like to start with you, Pramit. How important is the reiteration by India, the official line, the government's official line on Palestinian statehood? Does anything that was said today in the statement, in the MEA statement as well as Prime Minister Singh's statement, of any particular significance, anything out of the ordinary that caught your eye? I guess what I'm trying to say is, does an MEA official statement endorsing Palestinian statehood hold any weight in the larger scheme of things?
Well, I mean, the point is that India's position has been constant, that we would like to see an independent, preferably secular, Palestinian state created, and the position is always, now the new position, if you wish, in the past few visits has been that we would like to see the states of Israel and Palestine next to each other, living in security and living next to each other. That's been, I think, the minor shift that's taken place over the past few years. Abbas, on his previous trip, I haven't heard what he has to say on this trip yet, has said that Palestine has no problems with a better relationship between Israel and India. So on that front, I don't think there has been any major shift as far as we are concerned. And our position on Palestine is relatively clear. That hasn't been in any way changed, that we will continue to support through non-peaceful means, through peaceful means, the existence of a Palestinian state.
Right. I'll come back to you. I want to get Waeil Awwaad in on the discussion first. Waeil, Mahmoud Abbas has come to India at a time seeking political and diplomatic support when, as some people say, and some people opine, that his people, his cause, has very little realistic chance of actually happening, achieving a full statehood, full independence as an independent nation. Would you agree with that assessment that the Palestinian fight for independence is increasingly looking weak?
It's no doubt it's looking weak, but let us also remember that it is not only the president of Palestine represent really the Palestinian people. The Palestinian issue is in the heart of every country in all, from the non-aligned movement, from the post-Second World War, where it still till date is not being solved. And it is also an indication it's the longest plight of people suffering in the world is the Palestinian people. Therefore, if Israel is buying time to annihilate all of Palestine, that does not solve the problem. So maybe because we are seeing trends even among the American policymakers that the sympathy for Israel may not be 10 years from now. So therefore, Israel has to think seriously that even if Abbas is weak or if it is Hamas on the other side on Gaza Strip, it doesn't make sense. The Palestinian issue has to be solved. Occupation has to be put an end to it, and then you can have a two viable state, a viable and sovereign state of Palestine, which Israel is destroying each part, any pillars of a complete independent Palestinian state, and that does not give a good future hope that Palestinian may have. Yes, it is a disappointing stage in the history of the struggle for the Palestinian, but I think with the determination, with the Arabs, with the Muslim sympathy, with the whole world sympathy, with the Palestinian cause, this cause will live for till they get their aspiration.
Before I go to Rajeev Sikri, I just want to ask you a quick follow-up question. You mentioned the weakening support for Israel in the international fora. Do you think, like you said, 10 years from now, it'll have even less support? Is that the ground reality? Is Israel losing friends and fast?
Absolutely. See, Israel have fought the Arabs for 60 years on the media that the Arab going to throw Israel into the sea, and this is a minority state, and actually it was their own slogan that the Arab adopted. Now, it is 60 years from now, they're thinking that they can go again with the propaganda, that they can gain what they want. But it is reality on the ground, the suffering of the Palestinian, the daily confiscation of land, the Jerusalem, which is in the heart of every Arabs and Christians community in the world, that it is a crisis, it is an issue where it has to be addressed, and a solution should be found.
We'll come back to that. Rajeev Sikri, welcome to the show. First of all, the issue of illegal, as the official MEA statement states it, Israeli settlements on the West Bank is of course the center of the dispute. Benjamin Netanyahu has a history of talking one game and playing a completely different game as well. Yeah. 2 years ago, he said something in the US while he was in the Congress, and he said that he accepted the principle of a state solution. But isn't the ground reality such that Israel has made it impossible for the Palestinians to come to the talking table, to come to the round table, and the fact remains that the rise in number of settlements in East Jerusalem as well as the West Bank has only increased in the last 2 years. Thoughts?
You're absolutely right. I think that the question of illegal settlements is the heart of the issue, and these are growing. So and the important thing is that the settlers are now a very important domestic lobby in Israel. So even any government in Israel cannot ignore that sentiment. I think the Israeli expectation is that they will just create facts on the ground, and the Palestinians will have to live with it. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that as our friend here has said, the sympathy for Israel internationally is reducing. And I would not be surprised that if President Obama does get re-elected, you could see a little tightening of the screws by the Americans on Israel. He tried it a couple of years ago. The Israeli Prime Minister insulted him, and he went to the US Congress one day before that. So he had to announce his policy, 2 days at a State Department function before that. But I think that the innate sense of decency which I sense in President Obama will probably come to the fore in a second term. And therefore, Israel would have greater trouble in the coming years, particularly as I think the Egyptian position is very uncertain.
But aren't you discounting the very, very powerful Jewish lobby that helps senators, presidents, presidential wannabes in the US? Do you think that will, in fact, deter President Obama from, like you said, tightening the screws on Israel?
Well, I mean, that is there on the one side, but there are a lot of people in the United States and there are a lot of people within Israel who feel that the policies which are being followed right now are leading to a dead end. I mean, what has Israel done? It has erected a 30-foot high wall, and it has walled itself into an island between the sea and this wall. I mean, is that the future of Israel in a long-term perspective?
Hold that thought, sir. I'll get Prof.AK Pasha in on the discussion. Welcome to the show, Professor Pasha. My question to you is, how is Israel going to react to the statement, not just by Prime Minister Singh, but also the official government line, the MEA statement, and the fact that India has announced that it will support the Palestinian bid for a member nation status? How do you think Israel is going to react to all this?
Well, India's position is consistent to what it has articulated today, and we have a very difficult challenge to balance our consistent support with the Palestinians and our growing relations with Israel. So this will continue. The Israelis know that this is articulated by a government, a democratically elected government. There are internal pressures, so on and so forth. But under the overall framework of this, we also have very close relations with the Israelis, buying weapons and trade and so on and so forth. And this balancing act has been continuing for more than 20 years. So the support to the Palestinians, whatever new has emerged today, I think is not going to materially change the relationship. Right. It is in continuation of that policy.
Right, Professor Pasha. One quick reaction from you, Pramit, before we go into a break. Sure. Do you agree with Professor Pasha here? Should we expect relations between India and Israel to take a hit, or do you think that Israel understands that India has own diplomatic compulsions and they have, in fact, in the past, worked with less friendly governments, and even sworn enemies?
I think the Israelis have never actually complained ever about our relationship with our position on the Palestinian, on the issue of Palestinian statehood. I don't think there is a problem in balancing it. I think it works fine. The Palestinians know we support statehood. There isn't ultimately materially very much we can do about it. We're not a West Asian power in the Levant. We have a perfectly sound relationship with the Israelis, and the Israelis have been told, we will buy your weapons, we will do our trade, we will do everything with you, but we also happen to support Palestine. And if you're fine with that, then we can go ahead, and the Israelis have accepted this.
So do you think Indo-Israel relationship will continue to be on an even keel?
I don't think this will make not the slightest bit of difference as far as the Israelis are concerned.
On that note, we'll take a quick break. Lots more to come on The Big Picture. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Rajya Sabha Television. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're discussing the state visit of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. He came to India on Monday night. He spent the day meeting Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, the President, the Vice President, as well as the External Affairs Minister. Three, key MOUs have been signed between Palestine and India. And of course, like we mentioned before, India has committed $10 million to Palestine as support and aid. Waeil, Awwaad, the international perspective has changed over the years. Do you think too much focus has shifted to the inhuman living conditions of people in Gaza, people in the West Bank, and East Jerusalem as well? And that, in fact, takes the gaze away from the real issue, which, of course, the real issue is occupation. Isn't occupation the real issue? And do you think it's part of an orchestrated attempt to steer the gaze away, the international gaze away, from the fact that Palestine is under occupation?
Absolutely. See, the Israelis' mentality, the leaders of Israel have made it a state that if the elderly dies and the young generation is ignorant. So they wanted the status quo and prolonging of the crisis of the Palestinian. So the annihilation and the taking of Palestine is taken all over, and there is no question of a Palestinian state. But having said that, I don't think that the Israelis really realized that the international community, especially in the West, understand the geopolitical importance of solving this crisis, because now with the Islamic waves taking over the North African state and the anarchy has been created in the regions, including the Israelis now violating the Jerusalem holy places and entering into a kind of a confrontation, is calling for a third intifada uprising in Palestine. And this, if uprising happened, because you could see what happened at the border with Egypt and with the Islamists in Egypt now, so you are calling for a trouble. And I don't think Israel at this stage can really afford to see most of the extremist or Islamist countries surrounding it at this stage. It may look to the world, the international, look, I am a vulnerable state. It's more of a sympathy at this stage. But I think at the end of the day, even the international community understand that, even the taxpayer in the United States understand that it is time for finishing this problem, and the prolongation does not find a solution. You are only aggravating the situation and the plight of the Palestinian. And I think that is the problem, where the Israeli leaders themselves have already come in the open, that you, instead of exporting your crisis to Iran, and you say you wanted to attack Iran or you wanted some other things, and you must solve the Palestinian issue at the first stage, because Israel by itself is having an identity crisis. You have 100 nationalities who are brought under one umbrella of an Israel and brought to a state where, unless and until they solve the Palestinian problem, they have to have another war. So there is a question of stability in the region. It all depends on the Israeli mindset themselves, because Netanyahu, when he was a prime minister first time, Arafat failed to convince him for a solution. I don't think Abbas, at the weaker stage now where he is able to do the same, because now another intifada means more refugees, more expelling of the Palestinians.
Problems.
Yes.
Do you agree, Mr. Sikri, with what Mr. Awwaad just said? Also, do you think that the unilateralism that Israel has demonstrated over the years is about time that they change the mindset, like Mr. Awwaad said?
I agree with him. I think that Israel is faced with a very fundamental problem on whether it can be Jewish and democratic at the same time. They want to be a Jewish state, but the numbers of the Palestinians and the Arabs are growing. So either they will become an authoritarian state, which has huge consequences for Israel. No, for Israel itself.
Right.
They have a huge identity crisis. And I think that for all their bravado, the Israelis, if you talk to ordinary Israelis, why do so many Israelis come to India? They live under such permanent tension. I don't think that any people can continue to live for decades under this kind of tension. So I would like to hope that there is some good sense which comes to Israel, that they must settle and settle on an honorable basis. I find it very amazing that Israel says that, there's the right of return for all Jews anywhere in the world. And that is how the population of Israel from a few 100,000 is now 6 million or whatever it is. Right. But they say that those Palestinians who have been living there for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, don't have a right to their homes. I mean, this is blatantly absurd.
I want to put the same question to Professor Pasha. You heard my previous two speakers speak on the issue of unilateralism that Israel has demonstrated and the need for a change in mindset unless they want to go into an identity crisis. Would you say that mindset change is likely to happen anytime soon?
Not as long as Netanyahu is Prime Minister of Israel. If there is a different coalition, perhaps there might be a change of approach. But what is important is Israel also has taken unilateral measures, say, for example, withdrawal from Gaza, although it is surrounded by all sorts of restrictions. They are prepared to withdraw from some of the settlements and give about 35 to 40% of West Bank to the Palestinians, which of course is not acceptable to the PA and more importantly to Hamas. So the parties have reached a deadlock, and the quartet also has virtually failed, in this peace attempt. What I would suggest is, given the success of the NAM summit and the reiteration of NAM to support the Palestinian cause much more strongly, along with BRICS, India should, along with the BRIC partners, take an initiative to explore whatever is possible, because the environment in the West Asian and North African region is changing very fast. As someone articulated, the Islamic groups from Ikhwan to the other groups, they are at the moment not articulating on the Palestinian issue, but as the pressure on them increases, this will become much more aggressive issue, in my perception, before it snowballs into more violence and spill over into the region where India has core interests of oil, workers, trade, investment, security and stability. All that has to be kept in mind. So India should not be a bystander and it should take some initiative because the Western countries have been pandering to the Israeli for a long time. And this is leading to more and more instability.
Right, Professor Pasha. Point taken. Hold that thought. I want to get a quick reaction from Pramit. You heard Waeil as well as Mr. Sikri say that as long as, and even Professor Pasha said, as long as Netanyahu is in charge there, the mindset is not going to change. And it's true. He says, goes to the US and says, I'll take down some settlements, 30 settlements come down, but 800 new spring up. So it's going to be really difficult till there is a change of guard in Tel Aviv.
Well, let's put it this way. Well, I have to admit, I wouldn't expect Netanyahu to change his position on this. Let's keep in mind that as the unilateral action of surrendering the Gaza Strip and removing all the settlements was done by Ariel Sharon, who was considered even more right-wing than Netanyahu. So we can't completely rule this out. I would be very surprised if Netanyahu followed that path myself, but Sharon surprised everybody by going down that path. And in many ways, it's sort of like Nixon going to China. You need an extreme right-wing Zionist to be able to carry out something like what Sharon did in Gaza politically.
Right.
So, as I said, I would be surprised. There's nothing that Netanyahu has ever indicated that he would be interested in doing something like this. But we have to keep in mind there is the example of Ariel Sharon.
Right. We'll come back to that. We'll take another small break right now. After the break, the implications of the Arab Spring on the dispute in Israel and Palestine. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're still discussing Indo-Palestine relationships, also, of course, in the context of Indo-Israel relationships. Professor A.K. Pasha, very briefly, if you could, I have a question for you. Do you agree, Professor Pasha, that the revolutions that constituted the Arab Spring as we know it now sort of strengthened Israel and Netanyahu's hand more rather than drum up more support within the region for the Palestinian cause?
Yes, in the short run, I think initially, of course, there was concern in Israel about all of these developments starting from Tunisia, but they realize, all of them in Israel, the potential in the long run of mobilization of millions of Arabs and beyond. And it is inescapable for Israel to continue with this occupation and discrimination and defy the entire world. More than 120 countries support, and all the permanent members, more importantly, support the Palestinian cause.
Right.
So Israel knows that whatever it does, it is only a short-term solution. In the long run, these Arab Spring changes is going to impact on its policy.
Right. Mr. Sikri, were you surprised when after Egypt especially, there was this feeling that more support for the Palestinian cause will emerge, Arab countries would come together because this is one cause that every Arab has been fighting for in one way or the other over the years. Were you surprised when it in fact gave Israel the license to talk about Islamic revolution and the Islamic threat and didn't really do what Palestinians had hoped it would do for them?
You know, I think things are still evolving. The primary concern in Egypt has been to sort out things domestically. And this is just beginning to happen now. It's not quite over yet. The Israelis have been quite worried about what's happening in Egypt because the Rafah border crossing and that whole border with Egypt is no longer under their control. The policy of Egypt has changed. Fundamental issue for pillars of Israel policy has been the peace with Egypt and the peace with Jordan. Now, these old assumptions are coming under question. And if things in Syria develop in an unpredictable direction, difficult direction, then I think it would certainly have an impact on Jordan, and the whole basis for the peace that Israel has been enjoying for the last so many decades could collapse.
Right. Pramit Chaudhri, question for you. How significant do you think is the increasing rift between Hamas and the Fatah groups? Now, do you think if Palestine and Palestinians had a unified leadership, do you think that would increase the chances of greater international support for the Palestinian cause?
Almost certainly. I mean, one of the reasons, for example, even India is a country that has officially has a degree of, should we say, discomfort with the Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood in the Gaza. And there's been no invitation, there's been very little official interaction between India and the Hamas government in the Gaza. The Indian government is much more happy to work with Abbas. And of course, the division, if you wish, between the Palestinians makes the peace negotiations all that much more difficult, because there has to be, therefore, intra-Palestinian negotiations at the same time. And Abbas and Hamas don't get along all the time.
Right. Last word on the show. I'm running out of time. Waeil, Awwaad, like Pramit said, there is a problem there. Unified leadership is a problem, of course, and causes like these, there's always a problem. But do you see any chance of Mahmoud Abbas's faction, the Fatah faction, and Hamas coming together and working towards maybe a unified leadership to present a case in the international arena that would, in fact, strengthen and increase the chances of support for Palestinians? And also, briefly, if you could, where do you see the cause, the fight for Palestinian statehood going realistically from here?
Well, let me put it this way. What's scaring me first is that the Israelis' public opinion have changed from Madrid conference till date, where we had 55% of the population were for peace. Now we don't have even 15% of the Israeli population wanted one peace. Now with the Islamic tsunami happening around this Israel and encircling Israel, that also can make it more difficult for any kind of a settlement, even a viable Palestinian state. Thirdly, Hamas now is working along line with the PA, with the Egyptian, trying to make a peace broker between the two and unify them. But I think as long as the division is there, because it is a red line for Mahmoud Abbas, knows that if the Israeli made it for him very clear that there is no question of unification, and unless and until they accept what Oslo agreement has been there and what has been signed, that means recognition of Israel, which is impossible for Hamas at the current stage. They may recognize you at 1967 border, but beyond that, no question. So Israel will not give on Jerusalem. What the Americans are trying to give now, even declaring promises that Jerusalem could be the capital of Israel, they're heading for more trouble. And I don't see in the near future Palestinian state is more viable.
Right.
It is more of a political, and it's economical, and it is a humanitarian issue of the Palestinian, and we are heading for more instability in the region rather than stability.
On that note, Waeil, Awwaad, I must thank all my guests before I sign off. Prof.AK Pasha, thank you for joining us. Rajeev, Sikri, Waeil, Awwaad, as well as Pramit Chaudhri. Of course, two key takeaways in my opinion. One, Israeli unilateralism has to go. It is about time the mindsets in the people in charge in Tel Aviv change. Also, a unified leadership, of course, will help the cause of the Palestinian people. If it doesn't happen, more instability should be expected, can be expected in that region. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thanks for watching The Big Picture.